Mom, check my bag. I couldn't go on the school trip I was so excited about.
About 14 minutes after seeing my daughter, Emily, off to her school trip, she unexpectedly returned home and burst into tears, saying that shortly after I sent Emily off on her school trip, I received a call from her class teacher. Being told it was an emergency, I was startled, thinking something might have happened to Emily. About 5 minutes after I got off the phone with her teacher, just as the teacher had said, Emily came back home. The reason Emily came back home was something in her backpack. When I checked, I found that her brand new change of clothes and other items were wet and discolored. I found out that my mother-in-law, Mary, had gone to the school and done something. Not to complain, but my relationship with Mary is bad, and she even disliked Emily, so there's no way she would have gone to see her granddaughter off. I immediately called Mary, furiously demanding an explanation. Then Mary said that it wasn't fair for only Emily, one of her 2 granddaughters, to go on the school trip. She thought it would be too sad for the other granddaughter who couldn't go. Mary justified her actions as delivering justice to Emily, insisted she did nothing wrong, and abruptly hung up the phone. Unable to contain my anger, I reported the incident to a certain person. As a result, Mary ended up provoking the wrath of that individual, leading to her own downfall. I am a housewife in my 30s. I have a daughter with my husband, who is in the same age group as me. Emily, who turned into a 6th grader this year, has been looking forward to her school trip for quite a while. Since kindergarten, Emily has been practicing rhythmic gymnastics, and sometimes she demonstrates her skills as an example during gymnastics in her physical education class. Emily, who once appeared in the local newspaper for participating in a competition, has become somewhat of a local celebrity. Once a year, there is a showcase in physical education class where each student presents his or her own creative gymnastics routine. When the time for the showcase arrives, it's so popular that students from other classes also come to watch. Despite her popularity, Emily has never been overconfident or boastful about it. Whenever asked for help, she willingly spends time with her friends, offering advice and assistance until they are satisfied. I'm grateful she has grown up to be such a considerate person. My husband and I married for love, but since the beginning of our marriage, it's been a series of never-ending problems. The issues aren't with my husband, but rather because of Mary's behavior. She believes I stole her precious son and has been causing trouble for me because of it. Initially, Mary, in exchange for accepting our marriage, demanded that we live with her in the family home as a condition. My husband had moved out of his family home to live alone when he went to college, and I was in a similar situation. Therefore, we had decided not to live with either set of parents, but to live on our own instead. Of course, we agreed that if either of our parents ever needed care or assistance due to health or other reasons, we would discuss and address the situation then. Given our perspective, we communicated that we couldn't immediately agree to the matter of living together. We could have declined right away, but we were concerned about upsetting Mary and worsening our relationship with her. Then, my father-in-law, who was present at the time, spoke up, saying that it would be too harsh to expect the young couple to live with the in-laws. He proposed that it would be better to let us live alone for a few years, offering us a lifeline in the situation. Taking advantage of that, my husband skillfully convinced Mary, and at that time, the discussion of living together was dropped. After we got married, Mary kept bringing up the idea of us living together. Usually, if a parent-in-law wants to live together, he or she at least tries to be pleasant to his or her daughter-in-law, but she was the opposite.
You're young and a housewife. Must be nice. When I was your age, I worked part-time to help with the finances. I bet you keep the house immaculate. Then what's this mess?
She would come over when my husband was away, find faults in everything, and leave after criticizing. When my husband was out on overnight business trips, she would stay over, claiming it was too dangerous to go back at night, forcing me to endure her endless sarcasm. I developed mild neurosis due to her excessive interference. When my husband realized it was because of her, he confronted her firmly, assuring me we would never live together. Thanks to my husband and father-in-law, they kept her at a distance, and I started to recover. Soon after, I found out I was pregnant. I was anxious about her meddling again, but she was preoccupied with my sister-in-law, Kate, who was also pregnant at the same time, and showed no interest in me. She ignored my pregnancy and birth, favoring Kate and giving her grand gifts, while barely acknowledging ours. Years went by peacefully. Our daughter grew up to be strong, honest, and full of justice. Mary believed that our not living with her precious son was my doing, that I had brainwashed him. As our daughter grew and resembled me more than my husband, at family gatherings, Mary would cold shoulder her. In contrast, she adored my niece, who looked just like Kate as a child. She would give gifts to my niece for Christmas, but not to Emily. My father-in-law would secretly give one to Emily, but if he's caught doing so, she would snatch it away, saying,
I won't give anything to the child of the woman who stole my son.
When confronted by my husband or father-in-law in front of the kids, she dramatically claimed we were all ganging up on her. Emily gradually realized she was disliked by her grandmother. But she never became resentful. I'm so grateful for how well she's grown up. Just before Emily's preschool graduation, Kate got divorced and took custody of her daughter. The divorced Kate, along with my niece, moved in with my in-laws. My niece then ended up in the same school district and elementary school as Emily. They were in the same grade. My niece and Emily are in different classes, yet my niece often comes to see Emily. She frequently borrows school supplies and personal items that each student is supposed to have. I realized this because Emily's stationery was running out unusually fast. I initially suspected it might be bullying, with her things being hidden or thrown away, but it wasn't the case. Naturally, if two people share something, it runs out faster. I was relieved to learn it wasn't bullying, but I couldn't shake off this nagging feeling. I wondered if this was also a form of harassment from Kate. Mary didn't like me and Emily, often making our lives difficult with her constant nagging and harassment. Especially after Kate got divorced and moved back in with my in-laws, there were frequent incidents that seemed like she was contacting me just to make snide remarks.
How can someone as unimpressive as you be my brother's wife? You'll definitely be dumped eventually.
Kate seems to think highly of herself as a capable woman. Despite her own failed marriage, she would go out of her way to tell me that I too would inevitably be left by my husband. As irritating as it was, I tried to ignore her, thinking she was just envious of our seemingly happy family. However, the thought of her extending her spiteful behavior towards Emily was something I didn't want to consider. I told myself that I might be reading too much into it. This decision of mine would unexpectedly lead to consequences, but that was something to unfold a bit later. Time passed, and Emily became a sixth grader. In the sixth grade, there's a school trip. Emily had always been excited about it, especially each time she brought her savings for the trip to school. Now that she had reached the grade when the trip would finally happen, we frequently discussed where they might go in our conversations as a family. When it came to my own school days and my husband's, our daughter became curious about our school trip experiences as soon as the schedule and location were decided. Once our daughter brought home a note from school asking each family to prepare for the upcoming school trip, she and I began to prepare little by little. While she was excited and upbeat, I felt a bit worried. Recently, there had been an incident in her class, and the parents of the children involved were called in. Emily often remarked, "Why are the boys in my class so foolish?" showing her concern about the misbehavior of some rambunctious boys. By sixth grade, it's common for girls to start showing physical changes, and some more developed girls even start wearing training bras around fourth or fifth grade. Emily, being an active gymnast, had a muscular build, so her chest area wasn't particularly mature. However, the school trip guide for parents mentioned being cautious about underwear, as the trip involved several nights' stay and girls would be in separate rooms from boys. It also advised that girls not used to wearing bras should start getting accustomed to them. The guide also contained information about menstruation. These letters from school would inevitably be read by curious children. It seems that some mischievous boys reacted to the words period and bra and started teasing girls who were more physically developed or harassed them out of sheer curiosity. I had already talked to Emily about the changes her body would undergo as she grew older. Even before the school brought up the issue of underwear, her gymnastics club had discussed it, especially since gymnastics attire tends to be form-fitting, highlighting body lines. The club's discussions included care for girls as they approached puberty. So, I had already taught Emily about the individual differences in growth, and that it's wrong to tease others about their bodies. Emily, who has a strong sense of justice, defended the teased girls and called out the boys' bad behavior. One of the boys, whose father was a city council member, complained to his dad about a sassy girl standing up to the boys. This led to a major fuss at school, with the parents of the boys' friends demanding that the parents of the outspoken girls be called in. However, since there had already been issues with boys teasing physically developed girls, the parents' demands were not acknowledged. The parents of the teased girls even threatened to report the matter to the school board if it happened again, which led the school to adopt a stricter stance towards the boys and their parents. As a result, Emily became even more popular among the girls, seen as a brave and reliable ally. However, when out of their parents' sight, kids can sometimes commit acts that would put even adults to shame. I was really on edge about whether Emily would face any revenge from the boys' group she had a conflict with. Though the teachers, including the homeroom teacher, promised to keep an eye out, my worries didn't just disappear. Contrary to my anxiety, Emily seemed unconcerned, treating it as a thing of the past. We spread out the shopping for the field trip over several days. We couldn't do it on the days Emily had her rhythmic gymnastics classes. During one of these shopping trips, I unexpectedly ran into Kate. At first, I thought I could handle just Kate, but then Mary showed up from inside the store. They were shopping together, but Kate had left the store first out of boredom while Mary chatted with a salesperson. So I ran into Kate first, and shortly after, Mary joined us.
Good timing. I heard your daughter's a star in her rhythmic gymnastics class.
I don't want any favoritism towards my grandkids. Since your daughter attends that gymnastics club, I want both of my granddaughters to join.
But I'm a single mom, so naturally, you'll cover the fees.
She even demanded I do the driving. Why should I have to do all that? When I firmly refused, Mary accused Emily of bragging.
That cheeky daughter of yours must have bragged to her, who's in another class.
Don't look down on us just because I'm a single parent. Saying we can't afford extracurricular activities because we don't have a father figure belittles us.
I generally avoided any interaction with Mary and Kate. They demanded I pay the gymnastics fees and drive as compensation. Emily denied saying those things, but Mary yelled, "Children should not butt into conversations between adults." Emily, holding back her frustration, tightly gripped my hand. I couldn't let Emily endure this alone. I said we'd discuss it with my husband and decide. I trust Emily. She wouldn't say such things. I promised to speak with my niece to hear both sides. Announcing that we'd talk to my niece and make a decision, Mary and Kate seemed panicked at the prospect of my husband getting involved. Seizing the opportunity, we left. Once home, I hugged Emily. "I'm sorry for making you go through this," I repeated. She reassured me it wasn't my fault, but deep down, I knew my strained relationship with Mary was a factor. Even if it was caused by Mary's thoughtless words and actions. I briefed my husband when he got home. My husband informed my father-in-law about the situation, and it turned out that Mary and Kate, who were at their family home as well as his niece, were all concerned about what's happening. But I knew Mary and Kate wouldn't be easily deterred. Despite the difficulties, the day of the eagerly awaited school trip arrived. Despite checking everything the night before, I still asked Emily if she forgot anything. With a smile, Emily reassured me, "It's all good, Mom. We've checked everything together several times," and then she left the house with a light step. It's just about a 5-minute walk to the school. The kids were traveling by chartered bus, stopping at rest areas on the way. While doing household chores, I kept glancing at the clock, thinking, she must be boarding the bus by now, right? It's almost time for them to leave on schedule. I just couldn't help but worry. I was reminiscing about how, when I was Emily's age and went on my school trip, my mother must have felt the same way after sending me off, oblivious as I was, having fun with my friends. Just as I was lost in these thoughts, the house phone rang at an unusual time. Just 14 minutes after Emily left, I received an unexpected call from her teacher. When I was told something unexpected had happened, my heart raced, fearing Emily might have been in an accident. But as I listened to her teacher's relatively calm voice, I began to understand the situation. Emily had to come back home due to some circumstances. If I could quickly replace some items in her bag and drive her to a specified station, she could catch up with the chartered bus. After thanking the teacher for their thoughtful consideration and hanging up, I quickly found suitable replacements for the items she was supposed to take on the trip. As I was in the middle of changing clothes, Emily returned home, crying. I knew some of the details from the teacher, but seeing Emily's state was different from what I had been told. Just 14 minutes earlier, she had left the house looking bright and energetic. The only difference now was her tears instead of a smile. I asked her what happened, and she told me to look inside her backpack. When I checked, I found the interior slightly damp, though not enough to seep through to the exterior. The backpack, originally waterproof, had been further sprayed inside by my husband, anticipating any unforeseen events. Fortunately, only the inside of the backpack was wet, as the waterproofing held up, affecting only the items that weren't waterproof. Emily, crying, told me that Mary had come to see off her cousin and had poured juice into her backpack. Aware that her own grandmother didn't like her, Emily assumed she had come to see off her cousin, not her. So, engrossed in conversation with her friends from the same group, she didn't notice Mary standing behind her. It was her friend who was talking to her that noticed and said, "Hey, there's an unknown old lady touching your backpack." By the time she turned around, something had already been put in, and when she checked, she found the inside of her backpack was wet. Emily, understandably upset, confronted Mary, but she dismissed it as an accidental spill and left. I reassured Emily, telling her I would speak to Mary and encourage her to reset her mood and enjoy the school trip. I prepared a smaller backpack I normally use, filling it with substitutes for the original items and new spare clothes we had bought as reserves. Emily, regaining her spirits, helped me pack quickly, and we hurried to the car to drive to the designated station. We arrived before the bus, which had been caught in a bit of traffic. The bus made a special stop just for her, which we were grateful for. Emily boarded the bus, was greeted by her friends, and waved at me multiple times as she set off on the school trip. After watching the bus Emily was on disappear from view, I returned home, and before finishing up the remaining household chores, I called Mary to protest. I knew getting emotional would play into her hands, so I had to stay calm and composed while making my protest. Before picking up the receiver, I took several deep breaths. As I called her, Mary answered after a couple of rings. I calmly demanded an explanation for her actions with Emily's backpack.
She's one of my 2 granddaughters, and it just seemed so unfair for only one to go on the trip. I thought you wouldn't listen to anything I said, so I wet the items in her backpack to prevent her from going. Isn't it your lack of concern to blame here? Shouldn't you realize that?
What was this woman saying? That was my reaction upon hearing Mary's excuse. But as infuriating as it was, I knew calling her names would mean losing the argument. I tried to stay calm and counter her words. But then she abruptly ended the call, claiming she had to go out. I wasn't even aware that my niece couldn't go on the school trip. I generally avoided any interaction with Mary and Kate. How could I have known? Moreover, Emily hadn't mentioned anything about her cousin not being able to go. There was no information about any illness or injury, and even though my relationship with Kate wasn't good, if my niece had been sick or injured, my husband would have heard about it. My husband would have surely shared such information with me, at least for the sake of keeping me informed. The anger inside me was boiling, and just then my niece called. She confessed to feeling envious after seeing how excited Emily was about the trip. I generally avoided any interaction with Mary and Kate. However, she was told by her mother that she couldn't go because they hadn't made any payments for the trip. Mary, upon hearing this, decided that since my niece couldn't go, it would only be fair if Emily also had a painful experience. She had said this the night before, but my niece never thought she'd actually prevent her from going. My niece apologized to me. It turned out she didn't know they weren't making payments. Kate had told her that the trip was fully paid for and that she didn't have to worry about anything. So, my niece believed what she was told, but as the school trip drew near, she was confronted with the fact that no payment had been made. What a cruel thing for Kate to do. There were children in Emily's class who, for various reasons, couldn't attend the trip. When I was a child, there were also kids who didn't participate in school events due to illness or religious reasons. I had told Emily not to ask such children why they weren't going. I assume my niece's teacher, trying to be considerate, didn't pursue the unpaid fees for the school trip. If they had, my niece would have questioned it, and my father-in-law, who lives with them, would have noticed. I couldn't forgive Kate for imposing such a burden on her child. I had been avoiding them, but this time I couldn't just let it go. I decided to take action, not just for my niece, who had apologized to me, but also to give them a piece of my mind. I reassured my niece that it wasn't her fault and that this was an adult problem. That evening, when my husband came home from work, I explained everything that had happened. He immediately contacted my father-in-law, and we shared the whole story. My father-in-law, still working and in his late 50s, regretted not noticing the issue with the trip and apologized. He was quite shocked to learn that no payments had been made for the school trip. My husband was furious that Mary had gone to such lengths to harass our daughter at school. He apologized to me, regretting that he could have adjusted his schedule to drop our daughter off at school, thinking that if he had been there for the send-off, he might have been able to stop Mary's wrongdoing. It's hard to imagine Mary, who had never been involved in school events, would show up for a send-off. The resolution left a lot to be desired. However, my father-in-law wasn't done yet. After our conversation, he woke up Mary and Kate to give them a piece of his mind. This lecture apparently went on until the early hours of the morning, leading them to call us before dawn as a form of retaliation.
How do you like being woken up? Because you snitched to Dad. Mom and I got an earful of nagging from him.
I'm too sleep deprived to do any housework, so you come here and make breakfast. It's only fair since you acted all self-righteous and told on us. What an incompetent daughter-in-law you are.
However, I had only answered the phone out of reflex to the ringing and was half asleep throughout their complaints, eventually falling back asleep, seemingly taking my mumbled responses seriously. Mary thought I was coming over to make breakfast and didn't prepare anything for my father-in-law. This led to him getting upset, wondering if his lecture hadn't been enough, and rushing to make breakfast himself. In her haste, she made extremely salty scrambled eggs, and my father-in-law apparently commented that a wife who can't even make proper eggs and only knows how to get others in trouble is useless, almost like declaring a divorce. My husband thinks that this incident has finally gotten to Mary, and she might quiet down for a while. I hope so. Given all the times Mary has caused trouble, I wonder if just the threat of divorce would be enough to calm her down. But in reality, as my husband predicted, there were no more sarcastic calls from Mary or Kate, and we had peaceful days until Emily returned from her school trip. She couldn't stop talking about her trip, and during dinner, I had to remind her to either eat or talk. She excitedly shared her experiences, with gestures and all, right up until bedtime. She had only a limited amount of pocket money for the trip, but still bought souvenirs for us. She even thought of her cousin who couldn't go. Emily had noticed her cousin's absence and asked why. The teacher, not revealing the true reason of unpaid fees, simply said she fell ill suddenly. Hearing this, Emily bought matching keychains in different colors for her. I told her that her cousin was feeling better and would be back at school. I believe sometimes it's okay to tell a kind lie for someone's sake. A few days later, my father-in-law called us for a talk. The revelation about the unpaid school trip fees led him to contact Kate's ex-husband. My father-in-law had been unaware of their divorce's reason. He apparently avoided the issue because he felt it was a matter between the couple. However, seeing the financial struggles of Kate and my niece, he reached out to see if the ex-husband could contribute even a little in child support. The truth he learned was far different. The divorce was due to Kate's terrible spending habits, which her ex-husband couldn't tolerate any longer. He had initially planned to take custody of my niece, thinking Kate was incapable of single parenting. However, she adamantly refused to let go of her daughter, so he gave up custody in exchange for the divorce. He was desperate to leave her. The ex-husband had been faithfully paying the agreed child support, including separate amounts for school fees. Learning that his daughter missed the trip due to unpaid fees was a devastating and infuriating revelation for him. My father-in-law, too, had been concerned about my niece's lack of school supplies and worn-out stationery, and had given money to Mary to buy new ones. But Mary squandered the money on outings with Kate. Kate also spent the child support from her ex-husband on herself, not on my niece. My father-in-law asked my niece how she managed at school without the necessary supplies. She replied that she was told to borrow from Emily. It all made sense to me then. For a while, I had noticed the contents of Emily's pencil case becoming sparse. She said it was because she and my niece were using them together, but maybe she was actually giving them to her cousin. Perhaps after being asked to borrow supplies so many times, she just started giving them away, like a pencil here and there. Hearing about the true nature of Mary and Kate from my niece, and learning about the misuse of child support and their refusal to let her participate in school events, made me realize it was not good for her education. Realizing that being around adults like Mary and Kate was also not good, my father-in-law, after confirming with Kate's ex-husband, supported the idea of fighting for custody. If one party is stubbornly resistant, such disputes can automatically lead to court. Kate resisted because she didn't want to lose the child support, resulting in a court case. The court judged that she was incapable of parenting, considering her income and lifestyle. After the divorce, Kate neither worked part-time nor used the child support and money from my father-in-law responsibly. The custody battle was quickly settled in court, and my niece was taken in by her father. He had moved back to his parents' home. She will now live a life free from neglect, with the support of her paternal grandparents. Following their quick loss in court, Kate and Mary showed up at my house.
You really went and did something unnecessary. Now you're going to have to give me my allowance.
It was a good source of income. Ever since you married my son, it's been one misfortune after another. You're a jinx.
They had invaded our home early in the morning, rummaging for valuables. I immediately called my father-in-law for help. He arrived, apologized to me and my husband, and took them away in his car. Later, finding themselves without any source of income, they tried shoplifting at a local supermarket and were caught and handed over to the police. They didn't want to ask us for help and couldn't reach my father-in-law at work, causing trouble for him at his job. Eventually, my father-in-law, fed up with their antics, divorced Mary. He left the house to them, choosing to live with us, as he had always been fond of Emily. Mary took as much as she could from the divorce settlement but spent it all without thinking of the future. Even though they could shelter from the rain and wind, their electricity and gas were cut off, and eventually, even their water supply was shut off. When they ran out of cash even to buy food, she came begging to me, asking for forgiveness and pleading for my help, apologizing for everything they had done. "Let's all live together happily as a family," she says, but what does she mean by happily? Weren't they the ones who trampled on my efforts to live harmoniously? Don't they even think about earning their own money to buy food? I can't offer a place to live to those who won't even try to be independent, so I kicked them out of the house. They banged on the door for a while, but eventually, the police came due to a neighbor's call and gave them a warning. Having already been interrogated by the police once, they probably thought it'd be bad to get caught again and finally left. After that, they never came begging to us, but I heard they racked up a lot of debt from shady sources and didn't even try to work to pay it back. Their former house was plastered with demands for repayment, and at one point, loud angry voices could be heard, but now it's quiet, and I've heard neither Mary nor Kate have been seen. I don't know and don't want to know where they are or what they're doing. My niece has been taken in by her father and had to transfer schools. But she and Emily still keep in touch through letters and calls. They seem to enjoy their conversations. My husband and her father, now finding common ground, have been exchanging parenting tips through emails. They're even discussing taking the girls on a small trip together. I just hope for a brighter future for both my niece and Emily.